Giddy up, giddy up, giddy up, giddy up. How do I sound out there, guys? This is a new microphone. Is it good? Is it like butter? Is it is it excellent? Is it better? Is it better? Cusco's poison for Cusco. Anybody? All right. Let's look at some chats real quick. Koopa, time for a Paul discussion. Koopa, a worthy opponent. Please, we can talk about Paul. You want to hijack the conversation today? I don't have anybody waiting, so feel free, Koopa. You can join. So today's subject, I want to just focus on one topic instead of just kind of bouncing around all over the place, trying to talk about just why you reject Christianity. Why don't we just stick with one topic? Maybe that'll make things a little easier, a little more manageable. And I'm not getting questions about the flood or Old Testament atrocities or things that just aren't in my area of expertise. And so, yeah, feel free to talk to me about, did Jesus claim to be God? Did he claim to be God? Was he God? Did he claim to it? Did he even claim it at all? People like Alex O'Connor, who are should be taking notes, say that he did not. But yeah, it seems like most people would agree that, at least according to the accounts, at least according to John, that he definitely did. So is that historical? We could talk about that. Are the Gospels reliable? Are they giving accurate accounts of what Jesus actually did and said? And if they did he claim to be God in those accounts? And if you're saying that he did claim to be God, was he lying? Was he crazy? Or was he actually telling the truth? So if you're a doubting Christian too, we'll open this up to doubting Christians as well. If you have doubts about this particular topic, maybe you've watched one too many Alex O'Connor videos or debates. And so, yeah, feel free to join as well. So let's see. Metaphysics Mike did a refuting on your Trinity video. Will you respond? What do you mean by refute? You think his arguments were successful? You think they were good? Eric, why are you talking in this weird accent? I don't know. I am bored. That's probably why. I have never really watched Metaphysics Mike before. 20 hours ago. Yeah, I don't know. I don't care. I don't know. I probably am not going to sit and watch an hour-long video refuting a 5-minute video. No, just probably not going to do that. And so I'd maybe be willing to talk to Metaphysics Mike, but I just don't really, I don't know, these kind of debates between Unitarians and Trinitarians, I just find to be boring, and I just rather talk about history. So anyways, yeah. Metaphysics Mike has proven himself to be a joke. LOL. Yeah, I don't know. I don't pay attention to the guy. I really don't. I just don't pay attention to everything on YouTube. Do you know about NASA saying there was a lunar eclipse? No, don't know anything about that. Let's see. 33 AD. I was a Christian, but I'm not saved anymore, and I have doubts. But at the same time, it's like I know it's the truth. Well, David, we do have a resource, talkaboutdoubts.com. Let me pull up the screen. I'm always going to plug this, guys, so just deal with it. Deal with it. Let's see. Talk about doubts. So, David, this resource is specifically for you. And if you have questions about the topic, you're welcome to join the stream today. But if you'd rather talk privately in like a one-on-one or two-on-one Zoom call, we do have a team of people that can help you. You just go to talkaboutdoubts.com. You submit a question, you fill out the form, and you say when you're able to meet. And then you have great people like Dr. Sean McDowell or Mike Winger say that this is an awesome resource. And we would plug you into one of our experts. And so we have people who are experts in biblical studies, New Testament history, archaeology, science, philosophy, all kinds of disciplines. And so be sure to check that out. As far as like a lunar eclipse in 33 AD, I mean, I think you're referring to when Jesus was crucified and there was like a period of darkness. I don't see why that just could be like some sort of supernatural darkness as a sign of what was taking place. I don't think that it even has to be a physical anything for it to have any kind of value. And the bigger question, the broader question, the more important question is just, are the gospels reliable in general? Are the authors people who feel free to invent mythologies and all kinds of legends and invent details and stories just to make a compelling narrative, or are they honest and truthful reporters? We would definitely argue for the latter. And so check it out. And hopefully that would be a good resource for you. That way you don't have to deal with the doubts. Would you consider John 14:62 to be considered a God claim? Says Colby One Kenobi. And so, yes, absolutely. I've just done a video on that a couple weeks ago. So be sure to check that out. That's actually kind of one of my go-tos in any of these conversations. And so, yeah, be sure to like the stream. Be sure to push it out, share it in any groups that you have, because it'd be good to talk to somebody. There's nobody out there right now. Let's see. What do you think about Esoterica's video about Yahweh being a minor storm god? I haven't watched it. I do know that Inspiring Philosophy has dealt with the whole Yahweh. Was he just some sort of like pagan deity? All these other kind of things. And so he's got a whole playlist on those topics. So I would check that out. I'm currently reading The Trinity Evidence and Issues by Robert M. Morley. Any thought about this resource to learn about the Trinity? Yeah, I just bought the book myself and I've been reading through it and I like it overall. I don't share his precept kind of method that he talks about in the beginning of the book. That's really only the beginning of the book. When he's actually talking about the biblical data, I think it's excellent resource. I really enjoy it. I also like his chapter about the incomprehensibility of God. And so, yeah, I think it's so far I like it. I like it a lot. I like it a lot. It's very, very good. It's very good. It's very good. Good book. And it is on Logos Bible. You can download it on Logos for like, I think $10. It's not really bad at all. The Gospels have pearls of wisdom, but they're not reliable. Well, step up, Nick Sand. I'd love to talk to you. If you want to talk about reliability of the Gospels, you are welcome to do that, because any case for Jesus claiming to be God is going to have to be rooted in the fact that the Gospels are trustworthy, I would say. So I would love to talk to you about that, because I think they have a lot more than just some pearls of wisdom. Yeah, well, this is the awkward part of the show where nobody's calling in. I'm running out of live chat things to say. What do you guys want to talk about in the chat? If you got something, ask me a question. Now's the time. Before the chats kind of go off the rails a little bit and it's harder for me to find stuff. So if you wanted to bypass the whole super chat system and ask me a question, this is the time to do it. Otherwise, it's really hard to see without sending a super chat. There is somebody backstage. Mohammed. Hey, sir. You there, buddy? Mohammed, oh boy, this guy again. So a week ago, this guy just kept joining over and over again to send me private messages where he basically says like poo poo, weenie, doo doo, fart, only worse things than that, for no reason other than to, I don't know, try to mess with my head, I guess. Weird stuff. Thoughts about Redeem Zoomer. Zoomer's cool. I like him. I don't get into the in-house Christian debates as much as he does. And so I'm thankful for people that do that. And it's just not really my cup of tea. I like his short explainer videos. I think the dude is super funny. But the Reconquista stuff, I'm like, I don't know about telling people to remain in dead churches and be like the strongest Christian there in hopes that they can change it. But I know that's not exactly what he's saying. And so I'm not sure Reconquista is going to work, but he has pointed to some successes. So I would love to be proved wrong. I think it is a noble goal. I'm just not sure how feasible it is, but um, I would just want people to be in a good, strong local church under a good, strong pastor, being taught the word of God rather than just trying to feed themselves and basically be the strongest person in a church that has, some lady pastor who's okay with all kinds of terrible things. But maybe I'm strawmanning his position, and I don't want to do that. And there are good people in these denominations that he's trying to take back, good pastors. But you just can't guarantee that's what you're going to get in a certain area. And I just don't think it's a good idea to tell young men who are starting families like, hey, this is where you should go to church, in hopes that you can change it unless you're really strong in and of yourself. And to be totally honest, most people are not. Most people need a very strong local pastor in their area. So that's just my 2 cents. I'm sure he's heard all those things before. I got a super chat here. What are your thoughts about Isaiah 9 only referring to King Hezekiah? Yeah, we could talk about that real quick because I think it's silly. I was actually working on a short regarding that. Let me see here. Pull some notes up. One second, 1 second. Good question, Rick Martell. Thank you for the super chat. Let's see. So this is something that Rabbi Tobias Singer does argue. And he says, let's just quote him. Tobias says, in an effort to portray Isaiah 9:6 as a future prophecy about a divine Jesus, Christian Bibles crudely mistranslated the passage. The verse is not discussing any future event or the Messiah. Rather, Isaiah is describing the exaltation of King Hezekiah and the divine names bestowed upon him following the miracle when Jerusalem was saved by the Assyrian siege 2,700 years ago. Read this passage in the original Hebrew yourself. Again, I'm just quoting Tobia here. The KJV, NAS, and a host of other Christian Bibles meticulously, this is quite the charge here, meticulously changed all the past tense verbs into the verse into a future tense so that it would appear to be foretelling an event in the distant future. But actually, that's just not even correct. The perfect tense in Isaiah 9:6 may be plausibly understood as using a Hebrew idiom of the prophetic perfect, where a future event is so assured that it is spoken of as it's already completed. And so my friend Jonathan McClatchy points out that there are other examples of the prophetic perfect in Isaiah 5:13, where Isaiah speaks of the future captivity of Judah as if it's already happened. We also see it in Isaiah 10:28 through 32, 52, or excuse me, 53, 2 through 11, and Amos 5:2. Now, my biggest complaint against the whole idea that this is referring to King Hezekiah is that it's not plausible for the sense that Isaiah 9:7 says that his kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom. And you really have to go with some sort of hyperbolic interpretation. And so to quote the passage, it says, of the increase of his government and peace there will be no end, and on the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and uphold it with with justice and with righteousness from this time forevermore. And so how would this describe King Hezekiah? His son Manasseh worshipped idols. He restored the worship of Baal and Asherah. And this is in 2 Kings 21. He participated in the cult of Moloch. He sacrificed children. So within just 4 generations, what happened? The exile. They were sent back to Babylon. So how is that of the increase of his government and peace there will be no end, and on the throne of David and over his kingdom to establish it and uphold it with justiceness. Why can I not say this? Justice and with righteousness from this time forevermore. And so what rabbis have to do is say that this is some sort of like figure of speech, but that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Even granting with the words without end don't have to be literal, do not have to be taken in literal terms of an eternal kingdom. Um, that just doesn't describe King Hezekiah's reign at all. It was limited in scope and influence. Like it was just to Judah only. It wasn't like this major thing, and so I just don't think that it fits at all whatsoever. I think it's a terrible interpretation. So there you go. Yeah, Coob. Oh my goodness. All right. Who has time for this stuff? Seriously. Who has time for this stuff? So, you guys see that? He jumps up on the stage, changes his name to something it's like something normal, something you'd think would be a guest, and then yeah, um, turns into some sort of like ninth grader kind of joke. Like, bro, get a life. All right. Rick Martel, many thanks. Yes, sir. See Jonathan McClatchy's article. I'm gonna post it in the chat. Rick, that'll answer your question more directly. He has a whole section of that there. And so yeah, I think you'll find it to be very, very helpful. Very, very helpful. All right, guys. Yeah, I will try. Damien. Yeah, same guy. And he leaves me a chat. Because he wants to talk about um all right, just looking through the chat here. What's a book resource for showing the historical and archaeological mistakes made in the Book of Mormon? Um, for that, sure off the top of my head. I mean, most of the stuff you just find kind of online. A really good book that I like on Mormonism. Let me look it up here. I'll find the name. Do not know. Not sure why I'm having a hard time finding it. Yeah, there we go. Okay, I don't know why I had a hard time remembering the name. But it is Jesus' Resurrection and Joseph's Visions, examining the foundations of Christianity and Mormonism. Highly recommend that if you're looking to refute Mormonism. It's not so much about the archaeological mistakes made in the Book of Mormon, but it does talk about basically it's a comparison of Joseph's reported visions, and not just his visions, but also the supposed appearance of the golden plates to the 11 versus Jesus' resurrection. And so definitely check that out. And so I would highly recommend that one. And you could get it for Kindle or on Kindle for only like $10. All right. So we're 20 minutes in, and all I got basically so far is a troll. So if you guys have any questions or I don't know, a video you suggest, maybe you want me to go through and we could kind of discuss it for a little bit, that would be fine. Until we get some guests, I'm totally okay with that. So let me know. Try to have more of like a backup plan. I just have a lot of presentations that I've already done kind of recently, and I just don't want to go through the same presentation over and over and over again. I don't see any reason to do that. I mean, if you guys are probably have already seen them, so yeah. Crafty veteran survival question. What's your testimony? Were you always a believer? I actually gave my testimony about a month ago. If you want to go back and watch that video, you can. The short version of it is no, I was brought up Catholic, but it was just kind of like Catholic in name only, sort of. I did just go through my first communion, and that was basically it. So my family took me to church. My grandparents were very Catholic. I did go through the whole first communion ceremony thing, and that was cool. I never was confirmed. Um, but then we moved away, and we just quit attending church. And so I got really away from it. Um, and I was, for in my teenage years, agnostic and then atheist. And then I just basically came to Christ through reading the Bible, and eventually had basically like a spiritual experience while reading the Bible. But there was a long time that I was reading it, trying to make sense of it, um, and stuff like that. And so, yeah, that's kind of the short of it. I became a Christian when I was about 17 years old. And I spent like 6 months just reading the Bible and just seeing like, hey, if I came to this conclusion that God probably does exist, and if he does, he would probably reveal himself in some kind of special way. It wouldn't just be like a deistic God who just creates the world, gives it a spin, and never even says so much as howdy. And so that's why I started looking at other faiths, like Abrahamic faiths. I actually tried with Islam, and that was terrible. And so I was like, well, this doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. And it was just, I found the Quran to be like reading, um, I don't know, it was just a not fun experience. I'll put it that way. And then I started reading the Bible. I thought Jesus was really cool, but when it came to miracles, I had a real major like hurdle with that. Um, but after keep continuing to read, like I said, I eventually had like a spiritual experience that kind of overcame some of those doubts. I don't think that everybody has to have that to overcome their doubts, but for me, I didn't have access to the internet and all this other stuff. So yeah, that's basically it, kind of in a nutshell. All right, we'll try here. Let's see if this is like Taylor.
Hello.
Hi, buddy.
Hi. Is my audio coming through okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, cool. So I can't recall if Jesus ever does claim to be God himself. But I do think that there does seem to be like a progression of that, doesn't there? Like Mark not having, I don't think having any God claims at all, and then by the time you get to John, they're being more explicit. Like the John 1:1
Mm.
in the beginning was the word. So I guess I would. Are you taking all four gospels, or are you like breaking it down by gospel?
Yeah, well, there's two ways I can kind of go about that. And so, number one, I think that there's nothing wrong with John's gospel at all. I think it's a good historical source. Even if it's later, I can argue and give reasons why I think that it's written by an eyewitness and somebody who is trying to be honest and all that kind of stuff. Now, on the other hand, I could argue that there's just as high Christological claims in the Gospel of Mark. And so I could kind of go either way with that. And so I could defend the reliability of the Gospel of John and then say that, hey, it's most likely that Jesus really did make these claims and that John wrote them down. Or I can just say, well, right out the chute, Mark has very high Christology in the very uh, introduction of his gospel, just like John does. And then there is several places where Jesus very explicitly claims to be God, but he does so in a way that if you're not familiar with the Jewish context, it would be a little more difficult to recognize for like us readers, but it's definitely clearly there. And if you just understand the Old Testament at all, you would pick that up pretty quickly.
I'm finding going with Mark then.
You would rather start with Mark? Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's fine. Let me pull up Mark then. Give me 1 second. I'll share my screen here. Okay, this isn't anything that Jesus is actually saying at the moment. Okay, so I'm just going to start with what Mark says, but then we'll talk about some of the words of Jesus in the Gospel of Mark. Okay, so this is Mark 1, 1 through, I have 11 pulled up. I don't know if we'll get that far, but it says, in the beginning of the Gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, as it is written in Isaiah the prophet, behold, I send my messenger ahead of you who will prepare your way. The voice of one crying in the wilderness, make straight the way of the Lord, make his path straight. Okay, so Mark actually, what he's doing here is he's quoting a mixture of Malachi chapter 3, verse 1, and he's also quoting Isaiah chapter 40, but he's changing the words around and he's actually applying things that are applied only to Yahweh and he applies them to God. And so we'll look at Malachi 3:1 super quick here. And so it says, behold, I am going to send my messenger. He will clear the way before me. And the Lord whom you seek will suddenly come to his temple, right? And so the messenger, obviously, we know that's going to be John the Baptist. We're going to see that later in the context here. But it says he'll clear the way before me, and the Lord whom you seek will suddenly come to the temple. So who's coming? It's the Lord, right? He's to clear the way before me. So going back to John, then he quotes, or John, excuse me, going back to Mark, he then quotes Isaiah chapter 40 and verse 3. And so it says, a voice is calling, clear the way for the Lord in the wilderness, make smooth in the desert a highway before our God. I don't know why I'm stumbling over my words so much this morning. I apologize. But here it's saying, make ready the way of the Lord, make his path straight. His path? Okay. So again, he's referring to Jesus Christ, and he's saying, make his path straight. Where in Isaiah it says, clear the way for the Lord in the wilderness, make smooth in the desert a highway for our God. So do you see how he changes that around a little bit? But he's applying it directly to Jesus while he's still paraphrasing Isaiah. Does that make sense?
I mean, kind of, but could it also not be that John is just preparing the way for God himself by baptizing people?
Well, no, because who's the one who Mark has coming, right? It's who's he preparing the way for? It's for the Son of God, right? And so it says John the Baptist appeared in the wilderness, preaching a baptism, repentance, forgiveness of sins, and all the country of Judea was going out to him, and all the people of Jerusalem, and they were being baptized in the Jordan River, confessing their sins, blah, 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 blah. And then it says, and he was preaching, saying, the one is coming after me is mightier than I, referring to Jesus. I am not fit to stoop down and untie the thong of his sandals. I baptize you with water. He will baptize in the Holy Spirit, or baptize you with the Holy Spirit. And so he's very clearly referring, this is Jesus who's coming after me, right? Because then what happens right after that? Jesus comes and he's baptized. And then we get the whole scene of the heavens opening, the Spirit descending like a dove, and a voice coming from heaven saying, you are my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. So
Right.
again, just to kind of recap, Mark is taking the words of Malachi and Isaiah, and he's saying, hey, this person who is preparing the way for the Lord and is actually preparing the way for Jesus, because Jesus is the Lord.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's just Mark's claims about who Jesus is, but I just want you to see that, like, hey, that's a really high Christology, like right out the get-go, right? That's not any different than John basically saying in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God, right? And so now, is there anywhere in Mark where Jesus claims to be God? I would say that, like, there definitely is. It's right on his trial, right? Right at his trial. He's before the high priest. He's being questioned. They ask him flat out, are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed One? Jesus says, I am. And you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power, coming with the clouds of heaven. What does the high priest do? He says, what further need of witnesses do we have? We've heard the blasphemy. He tears his robes. He gets all upset. And he says, this is blasphemy. And they condemn him to be deserving of death. And so Now, Jesus is quoting scripture here. He's saying that he's the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power, coming with the clouds of heaven. So, do you know what verse, like right off the top of your head? I'm just checking to make sure you haven't heard this before, but do you know what verse he's referring to?
I think I've heard it before, but I don't know off the top of my head now.
No, that's fine, man.
Daniel 7.
Yeah, he's referring to Daniel 7. And so, let's see. So in Daniel 7:13-14, it says, I kept looking in the night visions. This is Daniel speaking. And behold, with the clouds of heaven, one like a son of man was coming. And he came up to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion, glory, and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and men of every language might serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will not be destroyed. So there's a couple things that are like really prominent that stand out here. So to give some context of what Daniel's talking about in chapter 7. So basically in Daniel chapter 2, King Nebuchadnezzar, he has a dream. And he goes to like the wise men and says, hey, interpret my dream. And they're like, cool, tell us what the dream is. And he's like, no, I'm not even going to tell you what the dream is. I want you to tell me what I dreamed and also tell me the interpretation of the dream. And so none of them can interpret his dream. Nebuchadnezzar basically goes berserk. He threatens to kill them all until Daniel says, hey, I can interpret the dream for you. And he tells him what the dream is, and he tells him what the interpretation of that actually was, right? And then basically in that vision, Nebuchadnezzar sees like this giant golden statue, and from the head all the way to the feet, it represents 4 different kingdoms. And then finally, there's this 5th kingdom, which is like a stone that's cut out without any hands. It comes and destroys the statue, right? And so Nebuchadnezzar sees these kingdoms, these 4 kingdoms of the earth, which would include his own kingdom, as well as what most scholars would say would be the Medo-Persian kingdom, the Greece, Rome, so on and so forth. Okay. Well, Daniel, in this particular vision here in Daniel chapter 7, he sees basically the same thing, but instead of seeing this glorious statue, he sees 4 different beasts, right? They're these awful beasts. And then finally, this 5th king comes in, and basically that's the end of all the other beasts, right? So what Nebuchadnezzar sees is glorious. Daniel, as a Jew, in his vision, he sees them as like these brutal, horrible beasts. And then the Son of Man is the one who comes and destroys all of their kingdoms, right? Now, what's super interesting about this is in the whole context of Daniel, where are Daniel and his companions at, right? They're in Babylonian exile, right? And so the whole theme in Daniel, it's just this running theme that we see over and over, is do not serve the gods of your captors, right? And so in chapter 3, there's the famous story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, where basically King Nebuchadnezzar erects this giant statue and says, you guys need to bow down and worship your statue, and anybody who doesn't do it is going to be thrown in a fiery furnace. Well, Daniel's Jewish companions, named Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they refused to do it. So if you remember, check this out, where it says, this is the Son of Man. Again, this is who Jesus is claiming to be, that all peoples, nations, and men of every language might serve him. Okay. So if you go to Daniel chapter 3, let's look at this word serve, right? Now, this word in Aramaic is, it's palak, right? And it's a word that is only used in Daniel when it talks about serving like a god and like some sort of giving it religious devotion. So going back to what I was saying about this giant statue of Nebuchadnezzar, he wants everybody to bow down to it and worship it. And they basically get snitched on, and it says there are certain Jews whom you've appointed over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, do not pay attention to you. They do not serve, they do not palak your gods or worship the golden image that you've set up. So again, this is like worship level devotion that Nebuchadnezzar is commanding. And they're like, no, we're not going to do it. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said to them, is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods, or there's that word again, palak, you do not palak my gods or worship the golden image that I've set up? And so he says, I'm basically going to throw you in a fiery furnace. And they say, well, if this be so, the God whom we serve, the God whom we palak, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he'll deliver us out of your hand, O king. But be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve, we will not palak your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. So, and then finally, if you remember the story at all, basically an angel comes, he saves them from the fiery furnace, and there's this like miracle that takes place. Nebuchadnezzar sees it, and he answers and says, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted him and set aside the king's command and yielded up their bodies rather than to serve or plaque or worship any other god than their statue." So think about it. If the Son of Man is not God, and the whole theme of Daniel, we see the same thing happen when Daniel gets thrown into the lion's den, right? Like the same word gets used there 2 more times about Daniel refuses to basically pray to King Darius as you would pray to a god. He's thrown in a lion's den, and it says the God whom you serve continually delivered Daniel, right? And so this same word referring to the Son of Man, all the nations are going to serve him. Well, again, Daniel's context, this is super weird. Don't bow down to the golden statue. Don't pray to King Darius. And yet the Son of Man, he receives this kind of worship. So he must be more than God. And you see that he comes and he sits at the right hand of the Ancient of Days. Now, one more thing I want you to notice here, this is really cool. It says his kingdom is an everlasting dominion, which will not pass away. His kingdom is not destroyed. Well, we see this theme in Daniel over and over again. And so in Daniel chapter 4, give me 1 second. And then 34. And then Daniel 6:26. So who has an everlasting kingdom in according to Daniel? Well, this is King Nebuchadnezzar after Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were delivered from the fire. What does he say? Greater his signs, mightier his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion endures from generation to generation. Then later in chapter 4, King Nebuchadnezzar basically goes crazy. For 7 years, he acts like an animal. He eats grass. He loses his mind. But then his mind comes back to him. This is because of a curse that God put on him, basically. And it says that I blessed the Most High. I praised and honored him who lives forever. And for his dominion and is an everlasting dominion, his kingdom endures from generation to generation. And then after...
Sorry, where's that at?
That's in 434, Daniel 434.
Okay. I don't know if, are you pulling it up on your screen? Because it's not changing. It's still in Daniel 7.
Oh, yeah, my bad. Here it is.
Okay.
435. I forgot to switch tabs. And then Daniel 6:26, it says, I will make a decree that in my royal dominion, people are to tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God. This is King Darius after Daniel was delivered from the lion's den. For he is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall never be destroyed. This dominion shall have no end. Well, again, that sounds really familiar, referring to the Son of Man. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which will not pass away. His kingdom is one that will not be destroyed. So going back to what Jesus said in 14, let me pull it up here. So when Jesus says, you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power coming in the clouds of heaven, this is why the high priest tears his garments and says, we don't need any further witness. You guys heard this blasphemy. Now notice one other thing too that's kind of interesting. It says, and some began to spit on him and cover his face and strike him. So they blindfold him. They start hitting him and they say, prophesy. And basically are like, yeah, who hit you? Okay. Well, think about that. Like they're saying, if you're omniscient, we're going to blindfold you and hit you. Tell us who hit you. They're saying that this Son of Man apparently has godlike powers, including omniscience. Does that make sense?
Some of it. I do think that sort of going back to what was it, Mark, where Mark 14:64 or whatever, where it says that he's blasphemed. Is blasphemy only a crime or only considered blasphemy if you claim to be God, or is there other ways of blaspheming, like claiming that you are a prophet of God when you're really not, or something like that?
I don't know if there's that as far as saying I'm a prophet, but I'm actually not a prophet kind of thing. And so, yeah, you're correct to point out that there are multiple forms of blasphemy, right? And
Yeah.
so, and I believe there's I'm trying to think of the passage in the Talmud where it actually like outlines them. This is something that's in Brant Petre's book. And he outlines the different types of blasphemy. And so what you have to do is you just have to look at the context, right? And so in the context, it's this claim. That's what they're considering to be blasphemy. And so if he's claiming this divine status of this son of man who has this everlasting kingdom, and it's right for people to serve him, but yet wrong for people to serve other gods. Think about that just from the Jewish context standpoint. It's like, yeah, that's why they're saying he's a blasphemer. They don't believe him. They don't believe he is the son of man, right? And so, but who is the son of man in this particular context? Well, again, he's the one who all nations serve. He's the one who has the everlasting kingdom. This fits best with the fact that there was this idea that there was another son of man, a Messiah, who is going to be basically kind of like share in God's thrones, share his honors, share his authority. I said thrones, throne. And so he's going to be given this very high authority, right? To the point where every nation basically they would worship him, right? Not basically,
So
they do.
so the reason uh the elders call it blasphemy is not because what he said wasn't expected to come true. It was because they didn't think he was the Son of Man, but they were expecting a Son of Man to appear.
It would seem to be
Is
that's the
that
case,
what you're
judging from the
saying? Okay.
context. Yeah, judging from the context, judging from their reaction, that's what they expected. So Jesus is claiming to be this like very exalted being, and yet, like they're like, well, yeah, we don't think that you are. You don't meet our expectations, and so therefore, this is blasphemy. We're going to crucify you, right? Because the Jews, at least the prevailing opinion of the time, and it's not to say that there wasn't multiple opinions of who the Messiah might be, and so they would think of him as like this Davidic king, this person who's going to overthrow Rome and do all of these, be this militaristic ruler. That was the most popular view. It wasn't the only view. You had the Essenes who thought there was a son of man who was like this heavenly being, which Jesus is kind of pointing to something that looks a little bit more like that. And then you had others who thought, that he would be like a prophet like Moses and be some sort of like restorer figure. And so they're basically saying, we don't think that you fit for my lights at least. And I could, you know, I don't want to like read too much into it. I think they're saying like, you don't fit any of this. Right. And so yeah. But to me, again, this is a very clear claim to be God. And who does Jesus think the Son of Man is? Right. So if you go to not John, I don't know why I keep saying John, Mark chapter 2, you probably heard the story before of the paralytic that was carried by four. They tried to
Mhm.
bring him to Jesus. They can't bring him in. They couldn't get near because of the crowd. So they removed the roof. They made an opening. They laid the guy in front of Jesus. It says that Jesus saw their faith, said to the paralytic, "Son, your sins are forgiven." The scribes are sitting there questioning their hearts. Why does this man speak like that? He is blaspheming. Who can forgive sins but God alone? And immediately Jesus, perceiving in his spirit, so with divine knowledge, that they thus question in themselves, said to them, why do you question these things in your hearts? Which is easier to say to the paralytic, your sins are forgiven, or rise up and walk, but that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins. And then he says to the paralytic, rise up, walk. He takes up his bed and walks home. And they're like, whoa, that's this guy's weird. But anyways, point is Jesus is saying that the Son of Man has authority on earth to do what only God can do, which is to forgive sins.
So, with regards to this verse, and um, an explanation that I've heard, I don't know if you're familiar with uh, Dan McClellan at all. He
Yeah.
has his uh, divine name theology, or I think it's called, where basically uh, by someone being imbued with the divine name, that they are able to act under God's authority. Um, and so that's why, uh, well, like in this verse here, like it says, um, so that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins.
Mhm.
It's he's correcting the Pharisees because they're saying uh, only God can forgive sins, but he's saying no, I can forgive sins as well because I have God's authority.
Yeah, to me, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense of all the other passages where he talks about being the Son of Man and some of the honors that he takes. And so, um, like, I mean, you could. The problem that I have with that theory is it's so stretchy that it can just cover basically anything. Well, no, he's not really this. He just has the authority to do everything that God does and say everything that God says and do everything that like it's just like I don't really understand why that works when like you already see like in the Old Testament, there's already like these theophanies where God basically appears as a man at times. There's also like the angel of the Lord who is basically saying and doing things, and yet like the people are like, I've seen God's face, and yet I'm still alive, and so on and so forth. And so, to me, just out of economy, I think it's simpler to just say like, no, there's this second being who is has all the authority, the names, everything else of God. And it talks about this being like in Isaiah, or excuse me, like in Micah 5:2, of this person's like origins are from like eternity, right? And so I don't know. It to me, it's just like too stretchy of a theory, and it's basically just admitting kind of some of the same points that we're already making. Like this is very high, but it's just saying, but it just can't be. He can't be God, and I don't understand the move that justifies that. I guess.
Um, so something interesting that you just mentioned. So you think that Jesus was the one that was appearing in the Old Testament anytime that there was claimed to be like physical interaction
I'm not saying
with
it was
God?
like always Jesus necessarily in some sort of theophanies, but you do see
Okay.
like the angel that was wrestling with Jacob, and then he basically says, "I've seen God face to face, and yet I live." Right, but at the same time, then we're also told, "Well, you can't see God's face and live," and so that's why he's so dumbfounded. That's why he's so shocked about it. And I think it's because this is like a pre-incarnate version, and I think that there are already this picture of multiple persons in the Godhead already. So like going back to Dan's point a little bit here, like in identifying who this Son of Man is, I think it's pretty clear that there's some lines that you can kind of draw towards him being the same figure that Isaiah talks about. And so Isaiah talks about a child being born to us, a son being given to us, whose government will rest on his shoulders, whose name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father. Okay, so that actually means like Father from eternity, which basically means it implies pre-existence. Okay, Prince of Peace, there will be no end of the increase of his government or of peace, the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and uphold it with justice and righteousness from then on forevermore. So again, this everlasting kingdom, the zeal of the Lord of hosts will accomplish this. So he's the father of eternity. So he has these like pre-existent origins, right? He's called mighty God. He has an everlasting kingdom, and yet he's a descendant of David and he's a son, right? And so to me, there's this idea already in the Old Testament of like these kind of seedlings of what we would call Christian theology today. Does that make sense?
Um, a little bit, but like also, I've seen at least this verse in Isaiah explained as I think they're called like theophoric names or something, where basically like whenever a king is anointed or whatever, that they're basically like given like it's like a divine authority kind of thing. and that they're not actually calling the king God, but they're saying like he has the authority of God or whatever.
Well, to call somebody mighty God in a Jewish context, again, that's what Jesus was basically seemingly getting in trouble for before the high priest. So that would be kind of weird if you're going to say that's from a Jewish context. Second of all, it's kind of weird to say that somebody's father from eternity, or saying that they have eternal origins under a Jewish context. It's just like, wow, this is like this really cool name. I mean, when you think of like names like that, like I don't see anybody in the Old Testament given a title quite like that. Okay. And then wonderful counselor. Well, like when the angel of the Lord meets, let me see, Judges. Let me see if I can pull it up here. Yeah, when it says the angel of the Lord said to him, "Why do you ask my name, seeing it is wonderful?" I mean, to me, that seems like it's probably an allusion to that right there. And then of saying that justice and righteousness from then on forevermore. Like, so, okay, this is like an everlasting kingdom. It lasts forever. It never ends. There's no end to the increase of it. It's eternal. And so it's from eternity. It goes to eternity. And he's called mighty God. It's kind of like, well, what does God have to say in order for somebody to also be called God? Like, what does he have to do to make it clear? I guess would be my question. You know what I mean?
Well, I guess at least for this verse, like it says, there will be no end to the increase of his government or of his peace on the throne of David and over his kingdom to establish it and uphold with justice and rightness from then on and forevermore. But like, there's not that didn't happen, I guess. Like the interpreting this to be talking about Jesus means you have to be assuming that it will happen in the future
Sure. Well,
because
if
it
the rest,
hasn't happened yet.
yeah, if the resurrection did happen, oh, and so it's not really a leap to think like Jesus won't return. And so if like there's independent evidence of the resurrection and the words of Jesus talking about that he will return and he will set up these kingdoms, then I don't really see like a big problem with that. So for an example of that would be in Matthew chapter 25. Give me one second here. So he's talking about, and if you read the whole context of Matthew 25, he's basically saying like the Son of Man, he's going to go away. It's going to be like a wedding. People who are invited to a wedding. You know what I mean? There's the whole parable of the what are those? The 10 virgins, right? The five that were foolish, the five that were wise, and it was the people that stayed awake and were ready, that
Mhm.
were ready for the Son of Man. And then it talks about the parable of the talents, where the Son of Man basically gives one person, you know, 5, 10 talents, and one person five, and the other person one, and they multiply them. I'm probably getting the numbers slightly. I'm just paraphrasing, and I think I got the numbers wrong. I think it's like 5, 2, and 1. And so, anyways, and he multiplies them to 10 and 5 and whatever. So somebody in the chat is gonna be like, actually. So yeah, I did get that wrong. But then at the end of it, he says, when the Son of Man comes in glory and all the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne. And before him will be gathered all the nations. He will separate the people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. Okay, so what is Jesus referring to here? Well, he's referring to Ezekiel chapter 34 and 17. It says, "As for you, my flock, thus says who? The Lord God. Behold, I will judge between the sheep and the sheep, between the rams and the male goats." And then again, he kind of repeats it in verses 20 through 22. "Therefore, thus says the Lord God to them, Behold, I myself will judge between the fat sheep and the lean sheep." So who's doing the judging? It's I myself, the Lord. But Jesus here, in the context of saying, I am the Son of Man, is the one who's doing the judging. And he's specifically alluding to Ezekiel chapter 34. So he's saying the Son of Man is the Lord God, is also the Lord God. So he's assuming that there's some sort of multi personality within the Godhead. Does that make sense?
Uh, I don't necessarily buy it, but I see where you're coming from.
What don't you buy? Or do you just need to kind of chew on it for a little bit?
Well, can you go back like a couple verses of what you were talking? And for what it's worth, we're also like in Matthew now. I think we were still
Sure.
trying to go through Mark's.
The original objection you said was, well, John has the high Christology, and so this is just another synoptic gospel.
Right. Like my point was that it there's like a progression, Mark being the first of the synoptics, and then Luke and Matthew coming after that, and then finally John, that there's like a progression of Christology between them.
And we show there's no progression in Christology because at the beginning he totally rephrases and says, hey, the highway for God is the highway for Jesus. So we show that that's actually not the case, that Mark has the same, it looks like he has a very high Christology, at least as high as John's.
Well, like I feel like in chapter 1 of chapter 1 of Mark, I'm not necessarily seeing like it's saying, I'm sending my messenger ahead of you who will prepare your way.
Whose way?
Voice of one crying out in the wilderness.
Whose way?
God's.
Mm-hmm. But who comes? It's real logical.
Yep.
Yeah, it's not hard to connect.
Well, I mean, like the fact that they are both, well, like one thing I've noticed before, at least, I don't know if this is what's the distinction without a difference kind of thing, but like the voice of one crying out in the wilderness in the original passage, isn't it like the voice of one, and then in the wilderness is like part of the quote?
I mean, I pull it up and it just says the voice of one crying out in the wilderness, make straight the way of the Lord as the I'm looking at John 1:23. That won't do. A voice cries in the wilderness, prepare the way for the Lord, make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Yeah.
Isaiah 40 verse 3.
I'm looking at the ESV.
I've got the NRSV UE.
Yeah, I was going to say, feel free to use the updated NRSV if you want. Let me look.
Yeah, it says a voice cries out, colon, quotation mark in the
McClellan fan. If you got this Bible, buddy.
Yeah, I got the SBL study Bible.
No, that's cool. That's cool. I'm gonna make one of those actually. I got, Yeah, it says a voice cries out in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Oops.
Yeah, so like it's the voices in the wilderness is part of the quotation. So prepare the way in the wilderness versus verse 3 of chapter 1.
In the wilderness, prepare the way of what? For who? Make straight in the desert a highway for who?
Our God.
Yeah, in the way of the Lord.
Yeah.
And then who shows up in Mark?
John or Jesus shows up, but like it's tying the in the wilderness to John being where he's crying out. Whereas in Isaiah, it is the wilderness where the way is being prepared, not where the voice is crying from.
Sure. I'm definitely saying that Mark is being a little generous with the text, and he's paraphrasing.
Yeah.
Okay. He's interpreting, and which is nothing different than what you would see rabbis in the Midrash do and stuff like that, right? And the Talmud. And so, but we see who comes, and then he even says who it is. One who is more powerful than I is coming after me. I'm not worthy to stoop down and untie the strap of his sandals. And so he's saying who's coming after him. And then that's exactly what happens. Jesus comes, and then there's this whole scene of him coming out of the water, seeing the heavens torn apart, this Spirit descending like a dove, And then the whole voice from heaven, "You are my beloved son, with whom I'm with you I am well pleased."
Mhm. Could that not be also the case if we're engaging with this in the sense of like the divine name, where
Well,
John
again,
is treating Jesus when Jesus has the divine name as acting on behalf of God, and that would also maybe perhaps be the moment where Jesus receives the divine name is in his baptism.
I mean, no, because again, that's who he is already in the text in Mark. And again, that's why yeah, when he's referring to him as the Lord who's coming. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess you could stretch it that far if you really are looking for a way to get out of it, but I just don't see that as like any more plausible, like any more plausible than what Christianity already Christian basic theology would already say. Jesus just is God, right? And so
Okay. Um,
because this is
are there?
this Christology is around in Paul's gospel, right? And so, first of all, I think there's a good argument to be made that like Mark and Paul knew each other, and I would say that that Paul argues that Jesus is Yahweh on multiple different levels. We could talk about some of those
No.
if you want.
Sure, we could do that.
Okay,
Given that I believe Paul is, or like Paul's epistles were written before Mark, according to like popular dating.
Sure. So real quick, according to popular dating. Yeah. So this is Romans 10:8 through 13. But what does it say? The word is near you, in your mouth and in your heart. The word of faith, which we proclaim, that if you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord, and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you'll be saved. For one believes with the heart, leading to righteousness, and one confesses with the mouth, leading to salvation. The scripture says, no one believes in him who will be put to shame. There is no distinction between Jew and Greek. The same Lord is Lord and generous to all who call upon him. And then he says, and he quotes Joel 2:13 or 2:32. Everyone who calls upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. Well, who is Joel talking about in 2:32? Everyone who calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. For in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem there will be none escape. And so it's talking specifically to Yahweh, right? And so again, like, and this is also in Peter's first sermon, by the way, at least according to the narrative. And so it seems to me really, really clear. And even to be saved, Paul is saying that you have to believe that Jesus is God. You have to call upon his name. He is God. He is the God in Joel 2:32. Again, he's the Son of Man is the shepherd. He divides the sheep and the goats. Jesus is Jesus. Paul is saying that he's the one that you call upon in order to be saved, who is Yahweh. And so it's like, I don't know how much clearer like it could be.
Well, I feel like there's the explanation that I've heard is like the divine name theology, and like specifically that could explain this part. And there's also the part in, like, I was trying to find it earlier, but I couldn't remember exactly. Maybe you know it off the top of your head. I believe it's in Exodus where God is saying to Moses that he is sending an angel before him, and he has the authority to forgive sins. Do you know which one that is?
Yeah, it's Exodus 23:20, I want to say.
Exodus 23:20. Okay.
Yeah. I would have to look at Dan's divine name theory a little bit more in order to answer it, because I don't want to like just talk out of my proverbial butt cheeks. But from what I understand, the problem that I have with it is it's just so stretchy that it's like anything could be waved off. I could use John 1:1 or John 1:3 or John 8:58 or 10:30 or any high Christology that you want to say. It could just be like the divine name. And to me, like that's like an unfalsifiable theory. It's kind of weird, but again, I would need to study it a little bit more. To maybe Dan has a paper or something on this. I think he has an academic paper on it. I don't want to just like I could watch some of his popular level videos and that's fine, but I would like to see a little bit more because to me it's like what is the distinction? I don't get it. Well, he's just a human, but he has everything that God has. It's just like okay, like well, uh, early Christian theology says that he pre-existed. Like, what else is he supposed to do and still not be God? That he created? Like, well, it's just through the divine name. Like, I don't follow it. It doesn't make sense. To me, it just seems more simple to just say, well, Jesus is God because there is this room for um, a multi-personal God within the Old Testament, and this is what all the New Testament seems to say and point to over and over and over like a beating drum.
As far as how the divine thing works, like, yeah, you could say that it's just like sort of hand waving it away, but it also, in my opinion, and I am not a scholar, but I guess it may be in Dan's opinion, and from the stuff that I've watched of his, is that it sort of like um it does explain some parts that are otherwise, I guess, maybe harder to explain
How
in a
like what?
Trinitarian view.
Like,
Um, so, for example, the Exodus 23:20, I'm going to send an angel in front of you to guard you on the way and to bring you to the place that I have prepared. Be attentive to him and listen to his voice. Do not rebel against him, for he will not pardon your transgression, for my name is in him.
mhm.
So he's basically saying that this angel who's going ahead of you has my authority. He can choose not to forgive your sin.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I get that.
and
But then like Moses basically, or even the author of Exodus 3, like he just uses him interchangeably with God, right? And so, I mean,
the
like,
angel, well,
yeah, like
that's another explanation that I've heard
so the angel of the Lord
is
appeared to him in oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Let me just read it real quick and then
no,
you can
you're yeah, go ahead.
yeah.
Sorry.
No, no, you're totally good. You're totally good. The angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the bush. He looked, and then the bush was blazing, yada yada yada. It wasn't consumed. And then he said further, I am the God your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said, so it's just again like I get it. He's given this something, but I think that's no different than just saying Jesus existed from eternity, but he was also given authority. It's something that he had already from eternity that it was given to him, but it's still that doesn't make him any less God, right? I mean, we see the same kind of thing in Genesis when Abraham sacrifices his son. Not Genesis 2, that ain't gonna do it. And so let me see here. It says, but the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven, saying, Abraham, Abraham, here I am. Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him. For I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. Well, the angel of the Lord. But earlier it says that God tested Abraham, saying, Abraham, here I am. Take your son, your only son, whom you love, and go into the land of Mount Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains that I shall show you. And so it's God, then it's the angel. Or was he given authority, or like who is it? He just speaks. I mean, it's so elastic, it's so stretchy. I just think it's more simple to say God tested Abraham, then the angel said, "Stop! Don't do that. I know that you fear God because you were willing to sacrifice your son to me." And so it's taking one passage from Exodus saying, "Well, it's delegated authority." Well, sure, but it could just be delegated authority if like eternal generation is something that is real and the Nicene Creed is right. And really, Nicene Creed is just trying to parse out the biblical data. And so yeah, I don't really get it. Again, I'd be happy. I do have some other guests, so I probably should wrap it up with you. Although I've really enjoyed
Yeah,
this.
yeah, that's fine.
This is great, man. I appreciate it. Come on back anytime, Taylor.
All right.
But like Yeah, go ahead. Give me your pushback on that because I did interrupt you,
Okay.
so I apologize, but go ahead.
No, you're good. So I guess my comment on like Exodus 3 and like any of the instances where it seems to go back between angel of the Lord and the Lord in the like Genesis or Exodus,
Mm.
the explanation I've heard is that is an interpolation because of later
Ooh.
Jewish scribes being like made uncomfortable of
Well, why wouldn't
God
they?
physically
Why
appearing in
why
front of
wouldn't they?
someone's.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, sorry, I didn't mean to
No, you're
interrupt.
good.
Instantly, my reaction was like gross because to me, it's like that's really sloppy interpolating. And it's like if you could just use like invisible editors anytime like a theory doesn't fit your theory, that's just really ad hoc. And like they're really sloppy interpolators because like why don't they just do that throughout? Why don't they like
Yeah.
clear up these messy parts that I'm pointing out to you? That just seems really ad hoc and it doesn't really and it just assumes like really stupid editors.
That's fair. I think it just means that there's like a lot more editors than maybe sometimes
Sure.
people
Yeah,
assume.
I'm sure. I'm not saying that there couldn't be. We could
Yeah,
postulate
yeah,
multiple editors. We have to give evidence that these editors actually like existed. We can't just start with a theory because, well, critical scholarship says there was a bunch of editors, with the Pentateuch. And I'm not saying there weren't editors. There clearly
right.
were. The most conservative person in the world is going to tell you, well, yeah, clearly Moses couldn't write after his death. You know what I'm saying? It was
Right.
probably written, after the exile. But now it's like we're saying there's so many editors that they couldn't keep their stories straight. I would think with more editors, you would be able to strip out more of the weird parts than just leaving the parts. And so I don't know. It just doesn't seem to work very good. But thank you again, Taylor. This has been great. We talked to you more. I just have a couple others waiting.
Yep, that's
And
perfectly fair. I have seen like you have other lives before with like different topics.
yeah,
So later on at a different time, I'd be happy to jump in again and see what we can
yeah,
talk about. Well, thank you
yeah.
for having me up here.
Yeah, please do. I typically do them around this time of day. I know it's not the best for everybody, but it's just what works for me. And so they're generally on Tuesdays and Fridays is the plan and possibly more. So be on the lookout for that. And I really appreciate it.
All right, thanks. Bye.
Yeah, but all right, very, very good. Very, very good. I'll have to look into Dan's theory a little bit more. I've heard about it. I've heard people talk about it. I just want to like get it from the horse's mouth. Jay, you're up, buddy.
Hey, good morning, Eric. How are you?
Keeping it as real as the streets.
Yeah, I enjoyed talking to you last time. We spoke about mysticism, and my wife got home, so we had to end the conversation short.
Oh, okay. I don't.
Yeah,
I remember your voice. Remind me a little bit of. Well, topic today is did Jesus claim to be
yeah,
God? And so I guess we should probably stick with the topic. But yeah,
yeah.
um,
I see no issue with the text and what it says about Jesus claiming to be God. um, my contention is that I don't think that's a good enough, I don't know, reason for us to assume that he is God.
okay. So you think Jesus could be mistaken or be deceptive?
I would say if we use the approach, like if we take all the testimonies saying that Jesus was God, even from him or his disciples or whomever, if we applied that to other claims and other books, it would be the same form of coming to believe like an Allah or whomever. So I think if we want to believe it, like if we want to find out if it's true, we need independent sources. We need critics, skeptics, etc. And the Bible, if we do that, I believe it becomes circular. And I just don't think that's responsible.
So you would need people who weren't Christians to say that Jesus claimed to be God?
Not only that, I think and this is an extraordinary claim, right? So we would need to see a lot.
Is there
I
anything
mean, I know we have.
supernatural just about the self of like it's not a miracle to just claim to be God, is it?
No, we've had that. I
Yeah.
think we still get that today.
Oh yeah.
So yeah,
So it's not actually that extraordinary. Claiming to be resurrected from the dead, that's
yeah,
an extraordinary claim. I'll give you that. And so what we would need is like sufficient evidence to overcome the low prior probability of like say something like the resurrection happening. So what we'd want to do is we would want to look at the witnesses if we have any, and we would want to eliminate like honest mistakes, and we would want to eliminate lies. But somebody just claiming to be God itself is not
Right.
Necessarily that extraordinary. Now obviously we would want proof, like some kind of miracles, because most of us would think that person's crazy or deluded, right?
Yeah, what I would say to that, and I hope this isn't like a debate. I honestly like.
No, it's just conversation.
Yeah, that's why I enjoy listening to your material. It's always a conversation. Like from what I remember, like we have the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John.
Mhm.
We have all of the prophecies, even before and during the time of Christ. Daniel, Isaiah, etc. The problem that I see and what I think about is these are all, how do I word it? If again, it's only in that literature, like.
Well, prophecies that would be in Jewish literature that
Right, the
predates
Torah and
Jesus by hundreds of
yeah.
years, yeah, in some case thousands of years.
Right.
So, but yeah, no, just talking about like the historical literature surrounding Jesus. I mean, what would you expect to see if it was like, what would you expect to see if it was true?
Yeah, these are so common. I try to come up with something original to say to this. A lot of what I want to say is what we hear all the time. But what comes to mind right now is what we have recorded as happening. It was a whole different lifetime, right? What they understood to be true, like the God of the gaps things, they had to use certain things for justification, reasons, and explanations. If I would like to see something like that, and I think it's fair in a more recent time. We don't see resurrections today. While we see people that claim to be God, we have the ability to disprove them today. And I think if Jesus, if we had what we have today and we were to be there in the time of Jesus, I think we would have explanations to show that there could be other things.
Okay. What I would want to know, me personally, is just I would want to know if the Gospels actually go back to witnesses, and if they go back to what the original eyewitnesses actually claimed. And then if we have that, we can rule out honest mistakes, or we could rule out that they were lying or something like that, right? And so we would just need to look at the context and the content of the actual claims, and then we would need to like establish that it does actually go back to witnesses and not like it's like through a long chain of telephone game and it's been manipulated and embellished and so on and so forth.
Right, and correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's the Book of Chronicles that we can date really, really close, or maybe Paul's letters. I can't remember which.
Is what I think you mean.
Corinthians. Thank you. So Corinthians, I believe the earliest I've seen is 5 years, but most people will say within 10 to 20 years of the resurrection.
You're thinking of the creed in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, and so supposedly it contains a pre-Pauline creed that's dated, and even skeptical scholars will date it between 2 to 5 years, maybe even less than that, to the Jerusalem apostles, and it's something that Paul picked up, and it's something that he shares with the Corinthians, and then he writes it in a letter, assuming that they're already familiar with it. And 1 Corinthians is written around 51.
Exactly. And then
we have
Paul.
Yeah, we have Paul.
His own Mark.
Then we have the 4 Gospels.
Right. The problem I have is, and you said eyewitnesses, and again, I'm always for being corrected when I'm wrong. I'm pretty honest. When we say eyewitnesses, like there wasn't a person, or at least I haven't been able to find, like, for example, like someone besides Jesus with a diary hand in hand. Like James was his brother, allegedly. We have two, I think, direct disciples out of the Gospels. But from my understanding, they wrote. It was like word of mouth. It was like a ladder, but like one ring down. There wasn't anyone directly with Jesus
No,
that could write down.
I would disagree with that. I would say John is specifically claims to be a witness who is giving his testimony in the Gospel of John. And
So do we have anyone, and this is more of a question, do we have anyone that can, because John's going to make this claim, because I think the book of John was more mystical. A lot of like crazy type miracles were happening more in John, I think, than the other books. How many people would you say can corroborate the words of John?
So what we would look for in John is we would look for, does he actually know what he's talking about? Is he truthful, and is he close up to the facts? So we would look at clues within the book to corroborate what he's saying.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, we have a bunch of details that John has in his gospel, and I can talk to you about arguments for the reliability of John, if that's where you'd like to start. Do we have somebody outside saying, yes, John? No, but his testimony would agree with the other gospels. Also, I'll push back on the idea that we see crazier miracles in John's gospel. That's not true at all.
I think more of them. The quantity of miracles.
No,
I
you
think
see less of them. There's like 7 or 8.
is there less in John? Okay, maybe I
Yeah.
misspeak. All right.
He-
Anyways, go ahead.
He emphasizes there's some that aren't in the other gospels, like turning water into wine, but the feeding of the 5,000 is in all the other gospels. And then you have Jesus walking on water, that's in all 4 gospels. You have the resurrection of Lazarus, but there's Jesus raises Jairus' daughter in the earliest gospel, Mark. And then Luke also has the widow of Nain, whose son is resurrected from the dead. And so there's a blind man that's healed in John chapter 9 who's born blind. But Jesus also heals blind men in Mark and in Matthew. And so the type of miracles are really not a whole lot different in John's gospel, unless you want to say like, well, the guy was born blind and Lazarus was dead for longer or something like that.
Sure. What I would say to that is, let's say I grant John, if he was a direct eyewitness, that's one eyewitness. And this is in no mean to be combative. I just think we need more. I think it's responsible that we say we need more.
Okay. So what I would argue, and when it comes to Christianity, is I don't just like stick to one exact argument to just boom, that one argument necessarily proves it. I use multiple lines of evidence. And so modern miracles, fulfilled prophecy, the testimony of Paul, the testimony of the disciples for the resurrection, and then Jesus' own self-claims are like a number of different things that I would bring in. And so now we have Paul as a witness. We have John as a witness. According to tradition, Matthew wrote his gospel, so he's a witness.
You have Paul as a direct eyewitness?
To the ministry of Jesus or to the resurrection?
My understanding is Paul, the only real account, like on Damascus, he had like the vision, right?
He had a vision that, according to Acts, caused him to go blind. And then he later received his sight. There was also witnesses there who heard a voice but didn't understand what it said.
Right.
But they did see the light and hear a voice. And so is it the same quality as like what Thomas got? No, I'm not saying that.
Okay.
But his miracle his ministry was endorsed by the apostles. They believe that he saw the risen Jesus. And it's a different experience because Jesus has already ascended to heaven at that point. This is post-ascension.
I agree.
And then we have Mark, whose testimony for all church early testimony says that it's based on the testimony of Peter. And then we have Luke, who was a traveling companion of Paul, traveled with Paul and was in Jerusalem with Paul, when Paul was in prison in Acts chapter 21, who would have had access to the witnesses. And so Luke is claiming to get his information from witnesses. So it's not a matter of like, who do we have direct writing from, although we do have that. It's also we have people who are close up to the story, we're able to interview people, tell the situation. And so it all goes back to like, what are the gospels? Are they like embellished narratives that contain nuggets of truth, but are like highly theologized and have invented stories to prop up the whole Christian story, or are they historically reliable books that go back to what the original eyewitnesses claimed, right?
Sure.
So what you would need to do is you would need to look at what kind of documents the Gospels are. Like, what are the writers like? Are they?
Yeah, I'm actually reading Koine Greek right now. I'm going through all the Gospels and I'm trying to go back to what it all originally said.
Sure.
And I'm just finishing up a semester here at college and trying
Nice.
to decide what books to buy to go down that road to do more studies. What I would say about the Gospels, just the Gospels alone, and again, I don't think it's enough for a couple reasons. One is for the topic we're on, sure, Jesus did claim to be God, and there are people, not only the Gospels, we have other people outside of the faith and outside of the Bible that wrote about Jesus claiming to be God. But one, again, not enough, because if it's just the Gospels, it's only 4, and without getting pedantic or extending like a like a 2-week conversation, we have issues in the Gospels. And I'd hate to go down to all that road. I think it's juvenile at this point for a random person to call in and try to debate the reliability of the Gospels. I see that there are them.
So I just
So
grant you that premise, though. So we probably have to get in the weeds. But I would also have to make a positive case.
Yeah,
Right? So to this point, we're just talking like hypothetically, like this is what the argument looks like, without giving any specifics of the data. Like it's just your opinion and my opinion. And so,
I mean, we see contradictions. We see. I mean, I'll just list a couple. And again, actually, let's not do that. Let me ask you 2 questions.
sure.
One is, while I ask the other one, if there is a couple pieces of literature that you'd recommend, the resurrection, historicity, Christology, things like that, in support of the Gospels, I'd love to get your recommendations so I can look into that. The only books I can find that I think are reputable is books by William Lane Craig.
For reliability of the Gospels,
he writes a lot. I think he's got like 24 books on a myriad of different topics.
Craig talks about the resurrection, and even the way Craig would talk about the resurrection is not the way that I would talk about the resurrection.
Mhm.
Craig will basically get you appearances and empty tomb, but
Yeah,
he's not
okay.
going to get you like details of the actual testimony. He's not going to like defend that. He's just going to defend like the early belief in the resurrection, and
Yeah, that's not good enough.
without the details of testimony. I think we need to know, were the details of the resurrection like multisensory or not?
Yeah.
And I don't think Craig does a good job defending that. And so, as far as like specific books just on the resurrection itself, to me, the argument that I make is a 2-step argument. Is one, it's going to defend the claim that the Gospels are written by people who are in the know, that they're truthful, and that they're knowledgeable, they're closer to the facts, and they're going to report what the original eyewitnesses claimed. And so that's basically arguing for the reliability of the Gospels. And then I would make the next step, which is, okay, well, they did make these claims, and so the content and the context of their claims rules out honest mistakes or deception. So if you're looking for books on like reliability of the Gospels, I mean, there's some easy like starter books, and then there's like more in-depth kind of things. And so I would just say like anything written by Lydia McGrew regarding the reliability of the Gospels, I would say is pretty good. Craig Blomberg has a couple of books, one on the reliability of the Gospels, one on the reliability of the Gospel of John. Richard Bauckham, Jesus and the Eyewitnesses. Luke Vandewey is a New Testament scholar. I think he's got a shorter book called The Historical Tell. And then he's got a longer book on the same topic. I forget the name of it. And so those are like some places to start on gospel reliability. But they
And you said McGrew, Bondberg, and Bauckham?
Vandewey, Bauckham, and Blomberg.
Blomberg, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So what I've been doing, which I think it complements the Jesus narrative, all encompassing, is I've been diving deep into Genesis, and you kind of spoke to the last caller about Genesis. Like I find issues with Moses. I've been looking into the theory of Moses. I think we see different authorship in Genesis.
Yeah, I'm a
so
cut you off right there. That's
Yeah.
just not my wheelhouse. So you
yeah,
wanna-
no.
that's
so
fine. Yeah.
yeah, no. So the reason I'm going this route, right? It's the first book. And I think if we have issues with Genesis, it's hard to move forward, because the reason I'm thinking this right now, and let me know where my thought may be flawed here, is that this is the explanation of how things start. This is the foundation. This talks about repopulating the earth. This talks about language formation. And there's a lot to go over here. Not right now, but I think in general. So
Yeah,
if
no,
so-
you can finish your point, but number one, I would be the last person in the world to get in the weeds with you. That would probably be more my friend Michael Jones. But second of all, Jesus would affirm Genesis, but there are multiple readings of Genesis. There's multiple readings of the creation narratives. There's multiple readings of the fall. There's multiple readings of, was the flood local or was it universal? There's different ways to understand the Tower of Babel. There's also the kind of literature, the literary genre of what Genesis actually is, especially the first 11 chapters, which is a minefield of debate and different things like that. Whereas the Gospels are clearly writing in a historical genre, point to Jesus, who does broadly outline the broad contours of the Old Testament. I think their Old Testament defense does need to be made to a certain extent.
here's why. Here's why. Jesus, I think, on 2 or 3 accounts, gave credit to Moses. Jesus said, I'm not here to abolish the laws. I'm here to fulfill them. To some context, I'm paraphrasing. And then he also was affirming that Moses, he was referencing what Moses said in the first couple books. So the school of thought here is, and I know you're not qualified, I guess I'm just asking, is this question fair? Because
Would
because
I
if
say,
Moses,
yeah,
if-
yeah.
if-
I would say that it's somewhat fair,
Right.
somewhat. Like I don't think that it does all the work that you say that it does.
help me understand why not.
Well,
Genuinely.
because genuinely, like we have dates that go way further back. Okay. Also, I think there are arguments that are brought forward of just traditional authorship of the Pentateuch. Okay. Again, Michael's done extensive work in this area, and others have, and so yeah, I think it would be damaging to the case, right? Like I'm not saying that it wouldn't, but we're talking about history that is further back, is harder to know, and to verify. It's covering a broader period of time, obviously, and so whereas like the New Testament is like bunched up around a short period of time in one geographical region, and then Acts is a little more spread out, and so I do think that yes, Jesus does affirm like the broad outlines of the Old Testament. He absolutely does, right? And so, but again, this is not like an area that I'm qualified to really speak
And I
to.
respect that. No, I appreciate
But
that.
but there are arguments. There's different schools of thought as far as some of the things that you're talking about in Genesis, that I don't think we have to read the first early, especially the first early chapters of Genesis in like this young Earth creationist ham-fisted kind of fashion. Okay.
Right.
And so yeah, I don't know. Anyways.
Beautiful. All right, I'll leave it there. I know you got more people.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you for talking to me.
Yeah,
the guy you mentioned that knows more about the OT.
Yeah.
Do you speak with him regularly, or does he have a show like this, or is there a way I can get hold of him?
Yeah, me and Mike are friends. It's just Inspiring Philosophy. He does do call-ins,
Oh,
but
okay.
it's mostly with Muslims right now. But if he opens it up for just broad skepticism or whatever, definitely call him in. We have done a show. He has done a show once like that. Mostly he's just focused on Islam at the moment.
Right. You should be. Yeah, that scares me.
Yeah, Islam bad.
Yeah, good deal. All right. Thank you again, Eric. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, you bet, man. Take care.
Yep. Bye.
Skibbity. Was Jesus God? Talk about the Old Testament. No, it's okay. Actually, it is fair. It is totally fair. It is fair. It's just not my area. And hey, this is a note to you up and coming apologist peoples. Guess what? If you don't know, just say you don't know. If it's not your area, just say it's not your area. There are very few apologists that can be just jack of all trades. That's what I respect about Michael is he kind of can be, but not all of us do that. I spend my time in certain areas. So uh, let's see. Let's see who's up next. We got a few people waiting. I offer, but I refuse. This guy sounds like he's a Christian and he just wants to share evidence. Probably won't do that. Let's do Emmanuel. Emmanuel, what's up, bro?
Oh man, you can hear me, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. So I've been recently on a couple TikTok debates with like fellows like Deconstruction Zone and Christ Before Jesus, and that led me to have some questions about Jesus' existence and whether Jesus was like a failed prophet if he even existed, because like because like the person I was arguing with like just like a few hours ago, he used like stylometry. I don't know if you have you heard of that stylometry?
I've heard of it off the top of my head. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, he wrote a book with a co-writer talking about how are trying to argue that the Gospels are dated to 140
Oh, brother. Okay.
140 AD.
Who said this?
Christ before Jesus.
I've never heard of this guy.
Yeah, he's a TikToker.
Yeah, I don't really spend any time on TikTok. Maybe I should.
Yeah, I'm just asking if you're familiar with the argument. It's basically like the Gospels are written in 140 AD because it's based on Gnostic texts like Marcion, like especially Paul.
I vaguely heard of it, and I think that theory is frankly really stupid and really bad and just not good at all. Lousy.
Okay, like I tried to bring up Tacitus, right? And he said that Tacitus is one of the earliest surviving manuscripts from Tacitus at like the 11th century. It has like it says Christians, right? Starts with a CHRESTIANUS.
Sure. Well, Tacitus is writing pretty long after the events, and he could be getting his information from Christians, and so that's not an argument that I would really use. If you're looking for like why I would say that the Gospels are, go ahead.
No, like he's saying that that word Christians has been used at the time at 36 to 37 AD, and he's saying that because of this, the Gospel of Luke is inaccurate, because based on the Luke's Gospel, Jesus died around like 36 AD or something, and that contradicts Matthew and stuff.
So without you being able to like kind of really fill out the argument, I'm just kind of guessing what they said, and I don't really want to do that because I don't want to straw man somebody. I mean, I could give you reasons for why I think the writer of Acts is actually extremely knowledgeable, very close to the fact he knows what he's talking about. But again, the topic of the discussion is, did Jesus claim to be God? Which I could point to Acts and go, hey, Peter, right at his first sermon at Pentecost, says that he's God. But yeah, I mean, trying to kind of keep it on topic, but without like specifics, I'm just left kind of guessing what this person is saying. But they don't sound to be very knowledgeable at all.
When I debated him, he seemed very knowledgeable.
Well, don't confuse confidence with competence. There's a lot of people on TikTok who are just parroting bad arguments they heard from MythVision, it doesn't mean they actually really know what they're talking about, and it doesn't mean they've really engaged in the scholarship that would be arguing for reliability at all.
Okay, so to get more specific, he's basically saying that Luke is wrong. Is either Luke or Matthew is wrong about when Jesus was born, right? He's
Born. Okay. Yeah, sure.
yeah.
No, I got you. Here, I'll answer that question for you real quick. Because it is a little off topic, I would then move to the next guest. But I appreciate you for coming up, and I can definitely speak to that. So give me
I
just a
mean,
second.
another one which is more relevant is that with like the deconstruction zone. I assume you heard of him.
I haven't really watched a lot of his stuff, but yeah.
Yeah, he said that Jesus. He basically mentioned like the time where Jesus said that some of you who are standing here today will wouldn't pass away until you see the Son of Man coming in his throne or something like that, right?
He says that in chapter 16, and then in chapter 17, Matthew talks about the transfiguration. And so they do see Jesus glorified at that particular point.
Yeah, but you said that his statement doesn't match his that statement doesn't match the transfiguration because he's not coming through the heavens, right? Like he's not coming from the heavens. They're just showing him his
well, there's a number of different ways that people interpret this particular passage. My friend Inspiring Philosophy Michael has done like a whole series of videos on this particular topic, so I would definitely check out those for at least a little bit more details. There's also some good books like Ben Witherington, When the Son of Man Comes, that you could also check out that I would really recommend. As far as Jesus, the whole failed apocalyptic prophet thing, I also have a debate that I've hosted on my website between Matthew Hartke and Bram Rawlings on this very topic that you're welcome to take a look at. But no, I don't think that any of those arguments like are particularly like successful. And so I also have a really short video where I go through the main text and talk about that. But yeah, like
I just feel like it's kind of sad that these people are able to just influence hundreds of people and stuff if things are probably wrong, and there's not a lot of people out there defending the faith.
Sure.
Yeah.
So basically, when Jesus says in like Mark 13:30, and he says, "Truly I say to you that this generation will not pass away before these things take place," I think that's what like DZ would probably be sort of referring to, that it sounds like a failed prophecy because Jesus says like all of these end of the world events are going to happen, and the Son of Man's going to come and yada, yada, yada. And so,
Yeah.
But earlier in Mark 13, Jesus describes events leading up to the destruction of the temple. He talks about wars, famines, false prophets, the desecration of the temple. If you actually read Josephus and know the context, like all of those things did in fact happen. I mean, Acts talks about a famine that was happening, and Paul was going around collecting famine relief funds for the saints that were in Jerusalem. There were false prophets. We did have like messianic pretenders and different things at that particular time. And so we do know that. The desecration of the temple did actually happen. It was destroyed in 70 AD. And so the term "this generation" actually fits in, where critics often trip up as they argue that the prophecy combines Jerusalem's destruction with the final judgment, creating the impression that both are going to happen close together. And so this is a quote from William Paley, a scholar. This is somebody from the 18th century. It's a little bit old, but I think it's still relevant. It says, "It is objected that the prophecy of the destruction of the temple is mixed or connected with the expressions which relate to the final judgment of the world, and is so connected to lead an ordinary reader to expect that these two events would not be far distant from each other. To that which I answer that the objection does not concern our present argument. If our Savior actually foretold the destruction of Jerusalem, it is sufficient, even although we should allow that the narration of the prophecy had combined what had been said by him by kindred subjects or on kindred subjects without accurately preserving the order or always noticing the translation of the discourse." So in other words, basically what's going on here is that the gospel writers sometimes combined related teachings, and their transitions aren't always explicit, and the blending creates this illusion of immediacy before the events, but it doesn't actually undermine the accuracy of Jesus' prophecy about Jerusalem's fall. Jesus himself even clarifies in Mark 13:32. He says, about that day or hour no one knows, not even the angels in heaven nor the Son. If Jesus didn't know the timing of his return, how could he be predicting it within a generation? That doesn't even make sense within the text. And so DZ is not even like being fair with the whole part of the text at all. Because again, if Jesus didn't know the timing of his return, how is he going to say, but it's going to happen within a duration? Does that even make sense to you? And not only that, but Jesus, like all throughout the Gospels, predicts delay, imminence and delay at the same time. And so if he really thought that his return was imminent, why did he explicitly, repeatedly, over and over, warn his followers about delay? He taught parables, emphasizing the need for patience and vigilance. And so I was talking earlier with a guy about the parable of the 10 bridesmaids, right? The bridegroom is delayed, and only the wise bridesmaids are prepared to when he finally arrives, right? Or there's the parable of the talents. It talks about a master who goes away on a long journey before settling accounts. The time that this would allow would be for the faithful servants to actually invest and multiply their resources. So the point to me is pretty clear. The master's return won't be immediate. There's also the parable of the faithful servant told in Matthew 24:45-51, where Jesus warns against assuming that the master is going to come back right away. It's the wicked servant that Jesus points out who's evil, who says, my master is delayed, and gets caught off guard when the master returns unexpectedly. And so the takeaway is always be ready, even if it takes a while. This points to a pretty clear and consistent picture that Jesus was preparing explicitly his followers for the long haul, not a quick turnaround. We don't see any sort of record in the early church fathers about some kind of great disappointment. We don't see any sort of hint of it anywhere. And so it seems to me that this is just like an objection that these guys kind of throw out there. And I know it's a popular one, but I just don't think it's like really all that strong. Even in Mark's gospel, he talks about the master being gone for a long time and be ready, right? If they wanted to say, well, the earliest gospel doesn't have that. Yes, it does. It does talk about in 13 past 30 through to the end of the chapter about a servant going away for a long time and telling his servants to be aware and stay awake for his coming. So he's already preparing them for a long delay.
I mean, if he knew if he didn't, he could just know, like, an argument for that against that, it could just be that he could just know the generation, but not the specific timing, right, of of when it's going to happen.
I mean, again, that pushback doesn't work considering the other context of the things that Jesus says. He talks about the possibility of delay in multiple parables.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem, man. All right. Popular objection. Very, very popular. One day I should probably do like a real in-depth kind of thing on it. And so I think that when they were editing Mark 13, that there was some things kind of moved around. You could also take a preterist kind of version of it. The Son of Man did come. He came in 70 AD, and there was destruction. I'm not saying a full preterist. I'm saying partial preterist because he does talk about like a final judgment, right? And so, anyways, chipboarded pizza. Anybody want some pizza?
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Hi.
Hello.
Do you hear me?
I hear you.
Okay, so my question was, is one that Bart Ehrman actually says a lot.
Okay.
Is that why is John's gospel like so different from the other synoptic gospels?
So different. Oh, you there? Oh, pause. I think he hit mute. Are you listening? Can you? Yeah.
Yes. Sorry, I'm back. Sorry.
Well, what does he mean by different?
Like what he says is, you're probably familiar with his book because I've seen your channel that you criticize it a lot, and so. But specifically, like with these bold claims where Jesus calls himself God, well, like I am the Father of one, and no one comes to me ven a mí, si
Yeah.
eres por el Padre, and those kind of things. And like John's Gospel doesn't talk much about like the kingdom of heaven, and so that's what's really bothering me.
Okay. So I could give you kind of a brief overview. And so basically there's two ways that I could go about this. Is number one, Jesus does make very high exalted self-claims in the synoptic gospels, right? Like
It's like in Mark, when the Pharisees asked him that, yes, but like in John's Gospel, it's where he really calls himself Jesus, like more directly.
calls himself God. Yeah. No, I understand what you're saying.
Sorry, and God.
No, that's okay. Yeah, he calls himself Jesus in all the Gospels. And so, no, I would push back in two different ways. Number one, I would push back in the sense that there is high Christology in all four of the Gospels, right at the beginning of Mark, as I was talking about with the first caller, which I don't know if you were able to hear that conversation or not, but I kind of discussed that already in that particular call. But second of all, I would just argue that John is written by a witness and Bart is just arguing from silence. It's a weak argument from silence because Jesus already clearly calls himself God in multiple different ways in the synoptics. And so just because he doesn't explicitly contain one of the sayings, like I and the Father are one in the other gospels, doesn't mean that Jesus already didn't say.
Yes, for example, in Luke,
Yeah.
like he says that he saw Satan fall like a lightning to hell, and that's like implying he was in hell watching Satan.
Well, he's in heaven. Yeah, I think that's he's saying there's a pre-existence claim there. Well, that's
Yeah.
only found in Luke's gospel, and yet, what are we going to say? Well, Jesus didn't say that because that's already only in Luke. Like that's just a weak argument from silence, right? It's like me saying
Yes.
that, well, just because General Ulysses S. Grant doesn't ever mention the Emancipation Proclamation, that means like he didn't know anything about it, or like the event is historically suspect. Like that's all that it is.
But
And so,
I'm not sure if it's just an argument from silence, because like Alex O'Connor puts this very well. Like imagine you had something big happen, and you have like a lot of different fuentes, a lot of I say this, founds. Say this in English. Sources. Yes, sorry.
no, you're good.
It's like a lot of sources of information from that event, and only one of them claims something that's very distinct from the others. Like for example, in Matthew and Mark are very similar in a lot of ways, and say the same things. In like it's almost like Matthew copied Mark, and I don't know, or was it the opposite? I don't remember, but
People say Mark first. People say
Mark was earlier, right?
Yeah. So, well, according to their scheme, which I don't have a problem with.
So that's the thing. Like if you have like all these different sources talking about the same thing, and just one of the sources says like a lot of like things that are not found in the other sources, it's it seems a little bit more difficult to believe.
Well, first of all, the early church fathers say that John was requested later in life, and this is why John is later last to say, hey man, like we've heard different stories. Is there anything else that you can like tell us? And so at their like urging, he decided to write a gospel. Okay. I don't see anything like historically implausible about that. And so second of all, again, there's all kinds of deity claims in the synoptic gospels. And so when Jesus says, I and my Father are one, or before Abraham was, I am, it's not anything that's out of place. Does that make sense?
Yes, but it's not just like the claim that, because okay, I can argue, I buy that, because there are like claims that are not directly from Jesus, that are not like directly claiming, he's not directly claiming himself to be God, but it gives the understanding that he's God. I've seen some of your videos on that, and yeah, you think you did a very good job. But also, like the resurrection appearances. For example, Mark just talks about the resurrection very very briefly, and then in John,
We
you
don't
get
know what Mark said. A lot of scholars believe that including Bruce Metzger, that the end of the gospel was cut off. It ends with guard, which is a Greek participle, and we don't have any other historical writing of that time where writing is just kind of cut off with gar at the very end of it.
really.
He's not the only person. There are other scholars, I believe Gundry and others, who think that it was just cut off. So it's very possible
Yes.
we don't even know what Mark was ending with.
So maybe he did talk more about the resurrection and said more things about after his resurrection, but this just cut off.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. That's plausible now. Okay, and also like I've heard that there are like different narratives or different styles, literature styles between Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and then John has like a more poetic sort of style, and that's why it seems more different. Do you think that's true?
Well, even if it's different, like it doesn't really prove anything in regards of historicity. So what we would need to do is look at the document itself of John's gospel and determine if like the guy actually was there and he knew what he was talking about. And
Yes,
so-
but if it is different, like most like scholars, there's a theory that scholars talk about, especially Bart Ehrman uses this argument a lot. Well, I know that when Bart Ehrman says scholars believe this, it's probably he's just like it's very a bit biased when he says that, because okay, so what he talks about is like the argument from different sources. Like he says that Matthew, Mark, and Luke like share some sources, and then John is a completely different source.
Sure.
So yes.
Well, let me do this because it sounds like you have a lot of different questions, and they're kind of on topic. They touch on what we're talking about, but they're kind of all over the place, and I'm not able to get into like specifics because I could talk about why I think John's a trustworthy account, and I could go through all the evidence. It sounds like you've watched my videos. You're kind of familiar with that. So what I would recommend, just because you have a lot of these different questions that like some of these criticisms by Bart is bugging you, is two things. Is one, there's a book called Eye of the Beholder. You can get it on Kindle for only $10. It's from Lydia McGrew, and she defends the reliability of the Gospel of John. She talks about authorship. She talks about why it sounds so different. She talks about the long speeches. She talks about pretty much anything that Bart has said about the Gospel of John, whether directly or indirectly. She like addresses a lot of that kind of stuff. So I highly recommend that. Number two, I would say go to talkaboutdoubts.com, fill out a form. And then what we could do is we could schedule a Zoom call. It could be with me.
Oh,
Jonathan.
really? That would be awesome.
Yeah, and then we could get into like a lot more stuff than we could get into.
Okay, yes, because I get that there's more people that have more questions. Okay.
Well, no, you're good. It's just without like being able to hone into one thing specific.
Yes, I get it.
Really,
it's
like,
different to just talk it on sobre la marcha.
Yeah, but that's exactly what the call could do.
Yes.
And so I would really kind of like to point you in that direction for now. And that way you can kind of just air out all your doubts, and then we could talk about them even over a series of calls if we need to. And we will help you realize like, A, you can trust the Gospels, B, you can trust John, C, that Jesus really did claim to be God, and we can give a whole host of historical reasons.
What was the name of the book again?
Eye of the Beholder, Lydia McGrew.
I am the
Eye of the Beholder. So like eye, like what you see out of the beholder.
Eye as
I'll put it in the live chat.
Eye as the Beholder.
Yeah, there you go. You sounds like you found it. Again, it's Lydia McGrew.
Yes, Lydia McGrew. Okay. And where did you say that I could schedule a call?
Go to talkaboutdoubts.com. And I'll put it in the live chat. I have it linked in every single one of my videos except the live streams. It's just YouTube automatically populates it for me. I put it in the
Okay.
live chat as well. So yeah, I hope that helps. I think we could just like sit
Yes.
down in depth with you.
Okay, thank you so
help you
much. This is
Yeah.
I think that you're really helping people that have doubts, and you've like helped me a lot with my faith, because all these people claiming that no, the New Testament is all made up and it's all all spoken, like there was nothing written until like 200 years from the events. And
Yeah. No, don't. Those guys don't know what they're talking about. And
Yes.
so yeah, we could get into some of that stuff too. So yeah, I appreciate you calling in, man, and hopefully that
thank-
helps. Definitely
thank
fill
you.
it out, and I'll tell Jonathan to be on the lookout for you. Okay?
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet, man. All right. We'll try Uno Mas. Patrick David, you're up.
Testify.
Hey.
What's up? I tried to talk to you last Friday, and it's always like I have like 15 minutes to go now before my next call, but I figured I'd hop in line.
Yeah, I actually only have 15 minutes too, and then I got to get ready.
Okay.
For that. So
Okay, well let's close it out with something fun. Let's go. I have so many different things I want to talk to you about, though. What do you? I haven't got to see the whole show. What have you done any messianic prophecies, or like what have you not gotten into yet?
Well, the topic is just, did Jesus claim to be God? I'm trying. Normally, I've been doing.
Oh, you want to get on that? Okay.
Yeah, that's normally I've been doing like this kind of free for all, and I've been finding that just opens up the gates for anything and everything. And so I'm trying to kind of keep it topical, see how that works.
Okay.
And
Dang,
so,
I'm not. I have nothing on that.
all right, well, just throw what you got at me, and I'll give you a yay or nay, and we'll see.
Okay. Well, actually, a bunch of people in the chat were talking Isaiah 9, and then what about Zechariah 9:9? Do you like either of those?
So for Isaiah 9, was it the whole King Hezekiah thing?
Right. Because there's an issue with the translations. Yeah. Shout out Wes is here, by the way. Last Friday he brought slides and everything. That was so cool.
Oh,
like this guy's so prepared.
He was, and I liked that he used my style and everything else. Like I he felt like he was like, am I taking a risk here? So Wes, I don't know if you saw my comment, but while Wes is listening, if he is, I talked to Joshua Brown, and I'm just going to read this out. Patrick, you're just going to have to be a bystander.
Yeah.
For like
No, go for it.
He says, basically, I emailed him. I brought up your concerns. And this is what Josh Brown said, who wrote the paper. He said the diagnosis of gastroparesis was on the basis of manometry or manometry. I don't know. I could be mispronouncing that, which measures the contractions, or here the lack of contractions of the stomach, and the delayed gastric emptying, both of which I noted, which he pointed out. He says there was no question of motility failure. A functional neurological disorder can be considered when evidence for organic disease is lacking, but given the findings of motility failure, that was not the case here. The disease was idiopathic, and this is the exact same thing when I talked to Caleb Jackson, who's writing an extensive book on this. He said, no, it was idiopathic. To my knowledge, no cause was ever found. Furthermore, the medical records document that the gastroparesis persisted right up until he was healed. As for the possibility of recovery, the academic gastroenterologists we consulted all indicated that the recovery was unprecedented. While it is possible, as we noted in the paper, and that some cases of viral gastroparesis can resolve after a few years, we found no other cases of spontaneous resolution after 16 years. The claim that upwards of 60% of gastroparesis patients might spontaneously recover after such a long period since birth does not seem sound, nor did any such possibility of meaningful recovery seem likely to the academic gastroenterologist we consulted. He also adds that he's going to be coming out with a book on this topic with more details, and it addresses comprehensively the questions of functional neurological disorders and other mind-body interactions as potential explanations, yada, 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 including hypnosis or various placebo effects. So, yeah, I appreciate Wes for coming up. It was cool. But Josh is like, no, that's just not the case. Caleb also said the same thing. That's just not the case with this particular opinion there. So it seems like Wes is in the chat, so he's listening.
Yeah, let me see if he chat. I don't know if he chatted anything, but I could say probably. I imagine what he would say is something like, well, that guy could be mistaken. It could still be a misdiagnosis. It could just be a really statistical improbability, right? That it happened. Just because we haven't seen it before, it doesn't mean that it couldn't happen that way, right? But anyway, sorry.
Yeah.
I know you're not trying to go on the miracle
No,
stuff.
you're good. I just don't think that's like the best explanation here, given the data for the reasons that Dan was talking about. It just, it doesn't seem to be the case. Like, we're having to say that these gastroenterologists and all these people involved just seem to be kind of making mistakes when like multiple people were consulted, and that this is an unprecedented case. And so, and it's that there are just, yeah.
Yeah.
So I just don't think that works.
What would you say if I countered with that's an argument from incredulity?
It's an argument from incredulity.
Yeah,
No, it's
because you're
talking
like,
about it's talking about what we do know. It's talking about we don't have.
do we have perfect knowledge of like medical science though?
We don't
I
have
mean, I don't think so.
medical knowledge, but the more medical knowledge that we grow actually like closes the gaps. You know what I mean? It doesn't.
Yeah.
And so the more medical knowledge that we have, the more we know that like these particular things just don't. They're not something that goes on. And so, but yeah, I would say here's what I could do is I will probably reach out to Josh and Dr. and I might see if he'd be willing to come on. Also, I see Wes is trying to join. Tell you what, Wes, here's something that I think would be better. Because I only have like
bring Wes up. Oh, okay, you got to go too.
I only got a few minutes. I gotta get ready for work. And so you're running.
Okay.
You testify. You're running. Running. Yeah, I'm running to work. So I don't want to get fired. But here's the deal. I can have Caleb join. Caleb is the one who I shared your clip, Wes. Again, I super appreciate the feedback. I thought it was great. And so Caleb is going to be even more knowledgeable. So I would rather connect you two. And Caleb is more than happy to join and do a call-in. He would love it. And so he's debated Dillahunty. He's talked about this with others. You probably saw him on Capturing Christianity recently. And so let me put, if Wes wants to come up and talk to Caleb, I can try and find something that works, and we could see if we can make it happen. So testify at Gmail, or testifyapologetics@gmail.com. Wes is your best way to go. I mean, I could bring you up for 2 minutes and say howdy, but I'm just not going to be able to get into any kind of back and forth right now. So, in fact, I think I just wasted all my time answering that. All of our time, Patrick, are very important and special time. So
you're good. No, I appreciate you doing these. These are always fun. And like, I hang out with a bunch of Christian guys, and like, I see a lot of positivity in it. And I always hate asking them questions because I feel like I'm like beating up a poor defenseless child. And I feel like you're more like I can come spar with you, like you're not gonna, it's fine. Yeah. I'm never gonna, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not gonna shake your faith. So
yeah. If I don't know, I just don't know. But my faith is just rooted in a lot of different reasons. And so let's just say like this whole deal with Chris gets knocked out, like big,
yeah,
like that's not what my faith is based on, is Wes's, or not Wes's, on that guy's testimony alone.
Right.
So as far as the Hezekiah thing goes, the one thing, and I'll just leave it with this, is like, and again, this is my pushback before, was I don't think it works because we're talking about a kingdom that has no end. And like King Hezekiah's end came pretty like abruptly. And his kingdom got passed to his son, who immediately started sacrificing babies to Moloch. And basically Hezekiah's descendants all went into Babylonian captivity. And so I think I know the argument, and I can't really like fully steelman it right now because I just don't have the time. I appreciate this Hezekiah argument, like actually tries to use the text and then like use the context of it and like the earlier parts of the verses and connect it to other things that Isaiah is saying, but like it just doesn't fit. Like it doesn't fit like what actually happened with King Hezekiah's reign. And so that's why I just don't think that's the main reason. There are other reasons, but that's the main reason why I think it's really bad. Is like King Hezekiah, it was like a local guy who, yes, there was this cool miracle that happened, but then immediately, like he shows his treasury to these other people who were like, hey, congratulations, and that's great. And then he invites people over, and these people are the ones that are going to take him into captivity later. He shows them their whole treasury. He houses the kingdom. His sons worship Baal and set up Asherah poles and sacrifice babies to Moloch, or at least his immediate son, and just destroys all of his reforms. And then they immediately get taken into Babylonian captivity. And I'm supposed to believe like, oh yeah, that's the kingdom that has no end. Like that doesn't make sense. I can't make that compute with the text. So that's why I think the Hezekiah thing sucks. And I think it does pertain to this argument because like Jesus is the mighty God in Isaiah chapter 9, I think. And I think he's drawing from a lot of these motifs. I think this is speaking of the Davidic Messiah in his self-claim. So boom, we tied it all together to what the original show is about. So we're not off topic now.
Nice. Back on topic. Okay, so I know you got to go. What about, are you streaming again on Friday? And what's the topic going to be on Friday if you are?
That's the plan. I don't know. I might do Paul. And so
Nice.
I
Let's
might
do Paul.
I might do Resurrection. So I'll probably go back and forth from those three topics. If I do one on prophecy, I might have Jonathan join, and if I do one on miracles, I might have Caleb join, because those two guys are way more knowledgeable on those topics than I am. So yeah, I'll probably be rotating between Resurrection, Paul, and did Jesus claim to be God for a while until I can figure out some other topics.
Sweet. Well, I'll try to actually read the topic before I call in next time, but thanks for listening to me, man.
Oh yeah, no worries, man. I appreciate you joining. All right. Cool. All right. Well, I got to go to work. Wes, again, email me, bro. I appreciate you. And I wasn't trying to dodge it all. I just would rather you talk to Caleb, because he will get into the nitty gritty. And I talked to Caleb on the phone, and he would be the guy to bring those objections to, because he is writing volumes. He's been writing this book. I've known Caleb for about 5 years, and he's been organizing this stuff for a really, really long time. So it'd be cool once it comes out. Maybe you could get a copy of his book, Wes. Maybe we could get Caleb to give you an autographed copy. You could hang it up. You could put it on like your mantle or frame it or something. So anyways, all right, guys, thanks so much for joining. I appreciate you guys all coming up. We'll continue to do these. And in the meantime, stay giggity gangster, y'all.